I had spent weeks planning Daniel's birthday, every detail carefully chosen to make him feel special. The balloons in blue and silver swayed gently from the ceiling. The scent of chocolate and vanilla filled the air from the cake cooling in the kitchen, and the table was lined with games and colorful cups. Daniel's 10th birthday wasn't just a party. It was a promise to him that no matter how broken our family felt at times, he would always be celebrated. My son had been through enough already, and I was determined that today would be about his joy. I watched his small face light up as his friends from school arrived, their laughter mixing with the clink of plates and music playing softly in the background. Yet beneath my smile, a tension gnawed at me, an invisible shadow I had tried hard to ignore, because I knew my sister Sophia was coming, and when she came, nothing ever stayed peaceful for long. I glanced toward the door as it opened, and my chest tightened. Sophia walked in, perfectly styled as always, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her heels clicking against the tile floor like daggers. She wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile that carried knives hidden beneath it. People turned to greet her, complimenting her dress, though I could see the familiar sharpness in her gaze. She never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place, to diminish the moments I cherished. Daniel ran up to hug her, because despite everything, he was pure in heart. She leaned down, patted his head mechanically, then glanced at me as though silently mocking my efforts. I forced myself to welcome her, but I felt the air change. Even on my son's day, she had a way of making everything about herself. As the party went on, I moved among the guests, making sure everyone had food and drinks, while Daniel laughed with his friends. The warmth of his joy calmed me for brief moments, reminding me why I had worked so hard. But every time I caught Sophia's eyes from across the room, I saw the storm brewing. She sat with our mother, Lucia, whispering things that made her smirk, and though I couldn't hear the words, I knew they were about me. My mother's expression remained cold, almost indifferent, as though she was only present out of obligation. It still hurt. After all these years, she never gave me the same warmth she so easily gave Sophia. I tried to shake off the sting, but the ache in my chest deepened. Why did even my happiest moments have to be tainted by her presence? I carried the cake into the kitchen to prepare the candles, the frosting shining under the light. It wasn't extravagant, but I had baked it myself, pouring love into every step. Daniel had helped me decorate it, adding sprinkles unevenly, his small hands eager to be part of the surprise. As I looked at the cake, I thought about how it wasn't just a dessert. It was a symbol of us. Imperfect, maybe, but made with love. I wanted him to know that he was worth celebrating, no matter what anyone else said. When I returned to the living room, Daniel's friends were gathered, excited for the big moment, and I caught Sophia watching me with a knowing smirk, her lips twitching like she was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My stomach sank. I knew that look. Something was coming. I gathered everyone around, lighting the candles, my hands trembling slightly though I tried to steady them. Daniel's eyes sparkled, his cheeks flushed with excitement, and for a moment the room glowed with innocence. Everyone began singing, their voices uniting in celebration, and I thought maybe, just maybe, the day could remain intact. Daniel closed his eyes, whispered a wish, and blew out the candles as cheers erupted. The smile on his face was the kind that heals every scar a mother carries. My heart swelled, but then I saw Sophia shift in her chair, her arms folded, her mouth opening. I froze mid-step, a sense of dread seeping into my veins. Her words always came like poison, and she never wasted them on kindness. The room quieted slightly as Sophia's voice rose, dripping with disdain. "Well," she said, her eyes narrowing on Daniel, "I don't know why we're making such a fuss. He doesn't even deserve a cake." Her words cut through the air like glass shattering, and the sound of laughter and chatter died instantly. Every head turned, and Daniel's smile faltered, his small shoulders stiffening as if he had just been struck. I felt my breath catch, the tray trembling in my hands. For a moment, no one moved, the silence so thick it weighed on the room like a suffocating blanket. Sophia leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs casually, as if she had just commented on the weather, not destroyed the heart of a child. Daniel's eyes darted to mine, searching for reassurance, for protection, his innocence colliding headfirst with the cruelty of someone he had trusted. His lips quivered, and his eyes glistened, though he fought to hold back the tears. Around us, the guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some whispering, others staring down at their plates, unsure of how to react. The children looked confused, their laughter fading into a silence that made the moment even more unbearable. My pulse raced as rage bubbled inside me, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I wanted to shield him, to shout at her, to make her regret every syllable. Yet my throat tightened. Words caught like thorns. Finally, I moved, placing the tray down with a force that rattled the dishes. My body surged with adrenaline, every fiber of me screaming to defend my son. Sophia's smirk grew, like she relished my anger, feeding off the chaos she had unleashed. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice low, trembling with fury, though I knew everyone could hear me. The guests shifted uneasily, sensing the eruption that was about to come. Daniel's small hand reached for mine, trembling, and I felt his heartbeat racing against my palm. At that moment, it was no longer just about a cake. It was about every time my sister had tried to humiliate me, every wound she had inflicted, and I knew, deep in my chest, that this time I would not let it slide. The silence stretched, and then Sophia leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with cruelty, her voice sharp as a blade. "You heard me, Elena. He doesn't deserve it. Some people don't get to have everything handed to them." The words sank into the air, heavy with venom, and my world tilted. I saw Daniel's face fall completely, the sparkle in his eyes dimming as the tears finally broke free. I felt something in me snap, something that had been suppressed for years, under the weight of Sophia's cruelty and my mother's coldness. The room was suffocating, and all I could think was that I needed to protect my son from her darkness, no matter the cost. My hand tightened around his, and in that instant, I knew I could no longer remain silent. The weight of Sophia's words pressed on the room like a storm cloud about to break. I looked around at the stunned faces of the guests, some horrified, some awkwardly avoiding eye contact, pretending not to hear. But my son's small, trembling body against mine fueled a fire I had buried for years. Daniel wiped his tears with the back of his hand, trying to be strong, and that was the moment I knew I couldn't stay still. My voice, sharp and shaking, cut through the silence. "That's enough, Sophia." The crowd shifted, whispers rippling through the room as if the air itself anticipated the explosion. I could feel my heart slamming in my chest, but the fear of causing a scene no longer mattered. My child's dignity was worth more than everyone's comfort. Sophia smirked, leaning back, as if my fury entertained her. "What? Did I say something untrue?" she asked mockingly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. She wanted me to react, to make a spectacle out of myself, and she knew she was achieving it. But this time I wasn't going to shrink under her shadow. I stepped forward, my eyes burning into hers. "You don't get to humiliate my son," I said firmly, my voice louder now, reverberating across the walls. Daniel clung to my hand, his face hidden against my side, while her cruel words still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. The guests exchanged anxious looks, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, others watching as though they were witnessing a show too gripping to turn away from. Sophia tilted her head, amused, her lips twisting into that familiar grin of superiority. I felt a surge of strength take over me, the years of her belittling and manipulation roaring inside like a volcano that had been dormant for too long. I grabbed her arm, my grip firm, surprising her for the first time. Gasps echoed in the room as I pulled her up from her chair. "We're not doing this in front of him. Come outside with me now," I demanded, my voice unwavering. Sophia jerked her arm slightly, but my grip didn't falter. Her eyes widened for a brief second. Perhaps she hadn't expected me to stand up to her with such force, but then she laughed. That laugh, it was mocking, cruel, the same laugh she had used to belittle me when we were children. "Oh, Elena," she sneered, "you think dragging me out is going to change the truth?" But I didn't care what she thought. I was no longer her victim. I was a mother, and my son's pain had turned my silence into fire. I pulled her toward the door, each step punctuated by the weight of years of buried resentment. The guests whispered behind us, their voices rising in a low murmur, some gasping at the spectacle, others exchanging glances filled with disbelief. My mother, Lucia, sat frozen, her lips pressed together, making no move to intervene. It stung, but it no longer surprised me. She had always chosen Sophia's side, always excused her behavior, always left me to fight alone. But now the difference was clear. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was for Daniel. I pushed the door open and stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face, but the heat of my anger kept burning. Sophia yanked her arm free and spun around, her eyes flashing with defiance. "What are you doing, Elena? Trying to play the hero now?" She spat, her voice rising. "You're pathetic." Her words were daggers, but for the first time, they didn't pierce me the way they used to. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw a woman so consumed by bitterness that she couldn't stand the happiness of anyone else. "Pathetic?" I repeated, my voice steady, my chest heaving. "No, Sophia. Pathetic is walking into a child's birthday and crushing his joy just because you can't stand not being the center of attention." Her eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms defensively, but her expression betrayed a flicker of discomfort. "Don't twist this on me," she snapped, her voice faltering slightly. "I'm just being honest." I shook my head, my voice breaking with emotion. "No, you're being cruel, and I won't let you do this to him, or to me, ever again." For a long moment, the two of us stood in the doorway, locked in a silent battle that stretched years into seconds. I thought about all the times she had mocked me at school, whispered lies about me to friends, made sure our mother always saw me as the weaker daughter. The memories surged back like ghosts, each one fueling my resolve. "You've made me feel small my entire life," I said, my words heavy, trembling with years of suppressed pain. "But you crossed a line tonight, Sophia. You hurt my son, and I swear that will be the last time you ever do." She laughed again, though it rang hollow this time, a forced sound that couldn't hide the cracks in her confidence. "You're overreacting," she muttered, looking away, but I could see it, the first hint of fear that maybe, finally, she was losing control of me. Inside, the voices of the guests grew louder, the blinds shifting slightly as people peeked out to watch the confrontation unfold. I knew the spectacle would become gossip, the kind of story that would ripple through the family for months, but I no longer cared. Let them talk. Let them know the truth. My son's tears were more important than my pride. Sophia sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes. "You think anyone's on your side, Elena? Look in there," she said, gesturing toward the window. "They've always thought you're too sensitive, too dramatic. They'll take my word over yours any day." The cruelty in her tone struck me, but instead of crumbling, I straightened my shoulders. "Maybe they used to," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But tonight, they saw what you really are." Her face hardened, the confidence she carried like armor beginning to fracture. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes, a shadow of doubt creeping in. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You may have everyone fooled, Sophia, but not anymore. Tonight you crossed the wrong person, and I promise you, every mask you've hidden behind is going to fall." She flinched slightly, a twitch in her jaw betraying her composure, but she quickly covered it with a scoff. "Big words, Elena. We'll see if you can back them up," she muttered. I took a step back, breathing heavily, my body trembling from the weight of what had just unfolded. The silence between us was thick, but deep inside, I knew something had shifted. This wasn't the end of the battle. It was just the beginning. I turned toward the door, ready to return to Daniel, ready to be the shield he needed, when I heard Sophia's voice again, quieter this time, almost like a threat whispered into the night. "You don't know what you've started." Her words lingered in the air like smoke, unsettling, laced with something darker than simple sibling rivalry. I froze for a moment, the hair on my neck standing up, before pushing the door open and walking back inside. The room fell silent as I entered, all eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. Daniel ran into my arms, and I held him tight, whispering in his ear that everything would be okay. Yet even as I comforted him, I couldn't shake the chill in my chest, because I knew she was right. Whatever had begun tonight was far from over. When I walked back inside with Daniel clinging to me, the atmosphere of the party had changed completely. The cheerful chatter and music that once filled the room were now replaced by an awkward silence that hung heavy in the air. All eyes followed me as I sat down, cradling Daniel close, whispering reassurances into his ear. I could feel the weight of their stares, the tension buzzing like static against my skin. No one dared speak, though the whispers I had heard outside now seeped into the walls of the house like a low hum. My son's little fingers tightened around my arm, as though he feared Sophia might lash out again. I stroked his hair and kissed his temple, determined to shield him from any further humiliation. The silence broke when my cousin Marisol stood up from her seat near the snack table. She cleared her throat, her voice hesitant, but strong enough to reach the entire room. "Sophia, what you said to Daniel was wrong. It wasn't funny. It was cruel." A murmur spread among the guests, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. caught between loyalty and shame. Sophia, who had just stepped back inside, froze for a moment before forcing a laugh. "Oh, come on, Marisol," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It was just a joke. Everyone's being dramatic." But her voice lacked its usual edge, the smugness tempered by the fact that people were finally beginning to question her. For the first time, Sophia wasn't the one in control of the room. Daniel looked up at me, his cheeks still stained with tears, and whispered, "Mom, why would she say that?" His voice was soft, almost fragile, but it pierced my heart like a blade. I hugged him tighter, rocking him slightly as though he were a baby again, because some people say hurtful things when they don't know how to be kind, I whispered back, my voice shaking with both anger and love. He nodded slowly, his little face burying itself into my chest, and in that moment, I felt both powerless and powerful. Powerless against the cruelty that had wounded him, but powerful in my determination to never let anyone, not even family, destroy his spirit again. I looked up and saw several guests watching us with sympathy, and I knew they had witnessed the depth of Sophia's cruelty firsthand. But then came the moment that stunned me most. My mother, Lucia, finally spoke. She rose slowly from her chair at the end of the table, her expression unreadable, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the tablecloth. "Sophia," she said firmly, her voice louder than I had expected. "That was unnecessary. You embarrassed your nephew and your sister. I won't tolerate that kind of behavior here." The entire room seemed to stop breathing. My jaw nearly dropped, because for as long as I could remember, my mother had never once corrected Sophia, never once taken my side over hers. Sophia's eyes widened, the smirk on her lips faltering, her face flushing with shock and humiliation. "Mom, seriously," she stammered, but the conviction in Lucia's voice left no room for argument. The ripple effect of my mother's words was immediate. Guests began to murmur louder now, some boldly voicing their agreement. "It wasn't right," my Aunt Carmen added firmly, glaring at Sophia. "There's a difference between a joke and cruelty." Another cousin chimed in, saying, "Daniel deserves better than that." The room, which had moments earlier felt heavy with judgment against me, was now shifting. For the first time, Sophia stood on unsteady ground, her carefully built image of dominance cracking in front of everyone. I saw the flicker of rage in her eyes as she looked around, realizing that the control she always wielded so easily was slipping from her grasp. For once, I wasn't the one standing alone against her cruelty. Sophia tried to recover, her voice rising above the chatter. "You're all overreacting. This is ridiculous." I was trying to lighten the mood, but her tone betrayed her frustration, and the more she spoke, the less convincing she sounded. I sat silently, letting the moment unfold, because I knew the truth was finally speaking louder than her excuses. Daniel pulled back from me slightly, his small hands gripping my shoulders as he whispered, "Are they mad at Aunt Sophia?" I smiled softly, brushing his cheek with my thumb. "They're realizing what she did was wrong," I told him gently, "and you don't deserve to carry her words in your heart." He nodded again, and though his eyes were still red from crying, there was a glimmer of relief in them. The cake, which had been sitting untouched on the table, now became the center of attention as a few guests suggested moving forward with the celebration. "Let's not let this ruin Daniel's day," Marisol said warmly, smiling at him. She walked over, crouching down to meet his eyes. "You deserve your cake, sweetheart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Daniel blinked at her, his lips twitching into the smallest shy smile. Slowly, the tension in the room began to ease, though the shadow of what had happened still lingered. As the candles were lit, the glow filled Daniel's face, and I couldn't help but think of how symbolic it was, the light pushing against the darkness Sophia had tried to cast over him. My son closed his eyes, made his wish, and blew out the candles as the guests clapped. Still, even as laughter began to return, as slices of cake were passed around and Daniel's smile grew more genuine, I couldn't shake Sophia's glare from across the room. She stood in the corner, arms crossed, her jaw tight, her eyes burning holes into me. To anyone else, she might have looked merely embarrassed, but I knew her too well. That look wasn't one of shame. It was one of warning. It was the silent promise of retaliation, the kind of look she had given me countless times before when we were children. Each time I dared to challenge her dominance. My stomach tightened, but I held Daniel close, reminding myself that protecting him mattered more than fearing her. Still, deep down, I sensed something was coming, and in that uneasy silence, I realized something important. Tonight had changed everything. For the first time, the family had seen through Sophia's mask. For the first time, Daniel had witnessed that he wasn't alone, that his mother would fight for him, and that others would stand by his side too. But as much as this small victory warmed my heart, I also knew it wasn't the end. Sophia's words outside, the way she had whispered that I didn't know what I'd started, echoed in my mind. She wasn't finished, and though Daniel's birthday cake had restored a spark of joy, I knew the real storm was only beginning to gather on the horizon. As the laughter and chatter returned cautiously to the room, I tried to focus on Daniel, who was happily eating his cake with frosting smeared across his cheeks. I wanted that image to stay imprinted in my memory, his innocent smile shining through after the storm. Yet, in the corner of my eye, I could still see Sophia, her posture rigid, her expression calculating. She wasn't defeated. She was planning. I had grown up with her schemes, the way she could twist even the most obvious wrongs into something forgivable in the eyes of others. My heart sank as I realized she wasn't going to let what had just happened slide. If anything, the humiliation she suffered tonight would only fuel her anger. The storm clouds were already gathering behind her eyes. It started small, almost invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. Sophia leaned toward my Aunt Carmen while handing her a plate of cake, speaking in a low voice that didn't carry across the room. Carmen's face shifted from agreement earlier to slight discomfort now, her eyes flickering toward me, and then away again. A chill crawled up my spine as I recognized the game. Sophia was planting seeds of doubt, of guilt, of manipulation. Within minutes, she had moved on to another cousin, whispering something that made them furrow their brow, glance at me, and then quickly hide their expression when I caught their eye. I felt like I was watching an invisible net being spun around me, one careful thread at a time. I wanted to march across the room, confront her, and rip that mask off her face in front of everyone. But a small hand tugged on mine, grounding me. Daniel looked up with wide eyes, holding a balloon string in one hand, the other clutching mine tightly. "Mom, can we play a game now?" His innocent voice pierced through my anger, reminding me what mattered most. This day was for him, not for Sophia. I swallowed my pride and forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart." So I gathered a few of the kids, setting up musical chairs in the living room. Their laughter filled the space again, though behind it I could feel the undercurrent of tension still swirling like a dangerous undertow. As the game played on, I caught fragments of Sophia's whispers slipping through the laughter. Words like overreacted, attention, and always dramatic. My chest tightened. I knew exactly what she was doing, turning my defense of Daniel into an attack on me, rewriting the narrative so that I wasn't a mother protecting her son, but a woman desperate for sympathy, seeking to humiliate her sister. I clenched my fists at my sides, forcing myself not to interrupt the children's joy with my anger. But each murmur that reached my ears made me feel smaller, weaker, as though the ground I had gained was slowly crumbling beneath me. It was the same cycle I had lived with all my life. 1 step forward, 3 steps back. Then came the moment that nearly broke me. My mother, who had defended me earlier, now sat with Sophia by her side, listening as my sister spoke with tears in her eyes. Yes, tears. I watched, stunned, as Sophia leaned on our mother's shoulder, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "I didn't mean it, Mom. I just wanted to make everyone laugh. But Elena, she always takes things too far. She made me look like a monster in front of everyone." My stomach churned as I saw my mother's hand pat Sophia's back gently, her eyes softening with sympathy. It was happening again. The shift, the reversal, the manipulation. Sophia wasn't the villain anymore. She was the victim, and I was being painted as the aggressor. I wanted to scream, to shout, to expose her lies right there in the middle of Daniel's party. But one glance at my son, laughing with his friends as they raced for chairs, stopped me cold. If I caused another scene, if I demanded attention again, it would overshadow his joy completely. That was her trap, I realized. She wanted me to react, to lash out in anger so she could point and say, "See? She's unstable. She ruins everything." I swallowed my fury and forced myself to stay seated, my nails digging into my palms until they left small crescents in my skin. I was trapped in silence, and she knew it. Sophia's eyes flickered toward me once, smug and satisfied, before she leaned back into our mother's embrace. But not everyone was fooled. Marisol, who had spoken up earlier, crossed the room and sat beside me quietly. She didn't say much, but her presence was enough, a quiet show of solidarity. She handed me a plate of cake I hadn't asked for and smiled softly. "You're doing the right thing by keeping calm," she whispered, so only I could hear. My throat tightened with gratitude. For years I had fought this battle alone, and now, even if it was just one person, I had someone standing beside me. That small comfort gave me strength, reminding me that not everyone would fall for Sophia's performance. There were cracks in her facade, and maybe, just maybe, this time they would spread wide enough for the whole family to see. Still, as the party wound down and guests began to gather their belongings, I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. Daniel was smiling, exhausted but happy as he clutched his new toys, and I clung to that image with all my heart. But Sophia's whispers lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. The way people avoided my eyes as they said goodbye, the awkward pauses in their voices, the way some hugged me stiffly as though they weren't sure what side they stood on. It all told me one thing: the battle wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. And deep down, I knew Sophia wasn't going to wait long before making her next move. The morning after the party, I woke with a hollow ache in my chest. Daniel was still asleep, clutching his balloon string in one hand, as if it were a treasure he refused to let go. I wished I could freeze that innocence, shield him from the storm I knew was brewing. My phone buzzed with notifications, and dread filled me as I opened them. Several messages from relatives hinted at misunderstandings and tension, each one worded too carefully, as though they were already choosing sides. And at the center of it all, I could feel her hand, Sophia's hand, guiding the narrative before I even had the chance to speak. By noon, my suspicions were confirmed. My cousin Clara called, hesitating before her words spilled out. "Elena, I don't know what happened last night, but Sophia is saying you embarrassed her on purpose. That you made her cry in front of everyone." My heart dropped, anger bubbling up in my throat. Cry? She mocked my child. She humiliated Daniel. And now she had somehow twisted her cruelty into victimhood. I clenched the phone tightly, forcing myself not to scream. Clara's voice softened, uncertain. "I just thought you should know what people are saying." The line went quiet after that, leaving me with the heavy silence of betrayal pressing on my chest. Later that week, the whispers turned into accusations. At a small family dinner hosted by my mother, I walked in to find the air thick with unease. Conversations stopped when I entered the room, eyes flickering toward me before darting away. My mother gave me a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Sophia sat smugly at the table, her hands folded neatly as if she were the perfect daughter. Throughout the meal, she dropped subtle comments. "I guess some people just like to make scenes," or "not everyone knows how to let things go." Each word was a dagger, cloaked in innocence, aimed directly at me. My appetite vanished as I sat there, trapped, my son sitting quietly by my side. It was Daniel who finally asked the question that broke the silence. His small voice, unknowing and pure, rang across the table. "Mom, why doesn't Aunt Sophia like me?" The room froze, all eyes darting between him and me. My throat tightened so much I could barely breathe. Sophia gasped dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest as if she were the wounded one. "Oh, Daniel," she said with a sugary smile. "That's not true at all. Mommy just doesn't understand my jokes." Laughter followed, forced and hollow, but it stung me all the same. My son's eyes filled with confusion, and I could feel the walls closing in. It was clear now. Sophia wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was trying to turn my child against me too. I couldn't let her win. So, for the first time in years, I stood my ground at the table. My voice shook, but carried strength I didn't know I had. A joke doesn't leave scars. A joke doesn't make a child feel unloved. The room went silent, my words hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, no one spoke, and I saw the cracks forming again in Sophia's mask. Her smile faltered just enough, her eyes narrowing before she quickly looked away. But instead of speaking, my mother cleared her throat and changed the subject, brushing the moment under the rug as though it never happened. That was the pattern, wasn't it? Silence, avoidance, pretending everything was fine. And it was that silence that had always protected Sophia. As the dinner ended, I realized something had shifted in me. I was tired of being the quiet one, the one who absorbed the blows in silence to keep the peace. Sophia thrived in silence, in shadows, in whispers. If I wanted to protect Daniel and myself, I would need to shine light on her lies, to expose the truth no matter how uncomfortable it made everyone else. The thought scared me, but it also filled me with a strange, burning determination. For the first time, I wasn't just defending myself. I was fighting for my son's dignity, for his right to feel safe and loved within this family. That gave me courage I hadn't known I possessed. That night, as I tucked Daniel into bed, he whispered, "Mom, I don't want to have another birthday if it means people will be mean." My heart shattered into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. I kissed his forehead, promising softly, "Next time, it will be different, I promise." But as I lay awake in the darkness, I knew promises alone wouldn't change anything. I would have to act. Sophia wasn't going to stop until she broke me, until she proved herself untouchable. If I didn't confront her lies now, she would poison everything. My family, my reputation, my son's happiness. And I wouldn't allow that to happen. As I closed my eyes, a plan began to take shape, not one of rage or public outbursts, but of truth. I would gather the strength to confront her openly, in front of everyone she had fooled. No more whispers, no more shadows. The next time she tried to twist the story, I would be ready. For years, Sophia had dictated the narrative, painting herself as the clever, charming sister and me as the fragile, dramatic one. But not anymore. This time, I would speak. And when I did, I would make sure everyone heard me. The days after the dinner felt like walking on thin ice, every step fragile, every word dangerous. Sophia's whispers lingered in the family like smoke that refused to clear, suffocating and invisible, but present nonetheless. Yet beneath the surface, I began to notice something new. Small hesitations in the eyes of certain relatives, quick glances that suggested doubt. Clara, who had first warned me about Sophia's stories, avoided Sophia's gaze now. Even my brother-in-law, Marco, usually charmed by her wit, seemed less amused by her antics. Something was shifting, faint but undeniable, and I clung to it like a fragile lifeline. I realized that Sophia's greatest weapon had always been silence. She depended on others' unwillingness to confront her, to keep her lies intact. But now, I began quietly breaking that silence. One by one, I reached out to relatives who had witnessed her cruel remark at Daniel's party. I asked simple questions, planting seeds of truth. Do you really think calling a child undeserving was just a joke? Some shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided the topic altogether. Yet in those uncomfortable silences, I saw something powerful. Guilt. They knew the truth, even if they weren't ready to say it aloud. And guilt, I realized, could be turned into strength. It was my grandmother, Abuela Rosa, who gave me the courage I needed most. One evening, I visited her with Daniel, and as he played on the floor, I confessed my fears. Her weathered hands clasped mine tightly, her eyes full of both sadness and fire. "Elena," she said softly, "you've spent too many years carrying a weight that isn't yours. Sophia thrives because people let her, but I saw what happened at that party, and so did others. Don't let her convince you that you imagined it." Her words pierced through the fog of doubt, steady and firm, reminding me that truth had witnesses. It wasn't mine alone to carry. Encouraged, I began to keep track of Sophia's patterns, writing them down in a notebook hidden inside my nightstand. Every dig disguised as humor, every sudden shift to victimhood, every time she painted herself the misunderstood one. I recorded not just what she said, but how others reacted, their discomfort, their silence, their reluctant nods. At first it felt petty, like I was cataloging moments of cruelty that no one cared about. But as the pages filled, the picture became clearer. This wasn't about a single cruel comment at a party. It was a lifetime of manipulation, carefully crafted and sustained. And now I had proof, even if it wasn't the kind you could photograph. But Sophia wasn't blind. She sensed the change in me, the way I no longer shrank when she entered the room. At the next family gathering, she tested me, throwing out a sarcastic jab about Daniel's overprotective mother. My chest tightened, but instead of shrinking back, I looked her straight in the eyes and replied calmly, "It's better to protect a child than to mock him." The silence that followed was electric. For the first time, she didn't laugh it off. Her smile flickered, her eyes narrowing as she realized I wasn't playing my role anymore. And though no one defended me aloud, I caught Clara's small, approving nod. It was enough to keep going. Still, Sophia wasn't about to surrender. That night, she sent me a text. Long, venomous, dripping with false concern. "I don't know why you're trying to turn everyone against me, but it's hurting the family. Maybe you should think about the example you're setting for Daniel." My hand shook as I read it, fury building in my chest. turning people against her. She had perfected that art long before I dared to speak, and yet I saw the desperation between her lines, the cracks in her mask. She was rattled. For the first time, she wasn't in complete control. That meant I was closer than ever to breaking her facade. As days turned into weeks, I found unexpected strength in the small alliances I built. Clara began defending me quietly, reminding others of Sophia's remark. Abuela Rosa shared my words with other relatives, gently urging them to look deeper. Even Marco, who had once dismissed Sophia's cruelty as teasing, stopped laughing quite so quickly. They weren't openly confronting her yet, but the ground beneath Sophia's feet was no longer solid. She could feel it. I could feel it. And though fear still gnawed at me, I knew momentum was shifting, slowly but surely, toward the truth. Yet, despite the small victories, I couldn't escape the weight of what was coming. Sophia wasn't the type to retreat quietly. If cornered, she would lash out harder than ever before. I could see it in her eyes, the silent warning whenever our gazes locked across a room. Something big was on the horizon, something that would either destroy me or finally strip her mask away for everyone to see. And though I didn't know how it would end, one thing had become certain. I was no longer just a victim of her cruelty. I was preparing for a war, one I intended to fight for Daniel, for myself, and for the truth that had been buried for far too long. It didn't take long for Sophia to strike back. She never wasted energy on small confrontations. Instead, she waited, patient and calculating, until she could stage the perfect attack. And one Saturday afternoon, at a family barbecue in my uncle's backyard, she made her move. I had just finished helping in the kitchen when I stepped outside and noticed the sudden hush of voices. My name had been on everyone's lips. I could feel it. Then I saw Sophia, sitting like a queen among cousins, her voice low and trembling with manufactured pain. "I don't know what I did to deserve Elena's hatred," she murmured, her eyes glistening with fake tears. "She's been turning people against me, saying things that aren't true. I feel so unsafe around her." The words landed like knives. At first I froze, my plate trembling in my hands. Unsafe? The audacity of it almost made me laugh, if not for the pity-filled looks aimed at her. At me. Clara's face flushed red with anger, but she said nothing, caught in the same paralysis as I was. My uncle shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure whether to comfort her or question her. And Sophia. Oh, Sophia knew how to work a crowd. She sniffled at just the right moment, dabbing her eyes with a napkin, her voice cracking as she whispered, "I just want us to be a family again. But Elena, she seems determined to destroy me." Every syllable was poison disguised as vulnerability. Every tear a performance meant to bury me alive under suspicion. My instincts screamed at me to shout, to expose her lies right then and there, but another part of me knew that would only make me look like the aggressor she was painting me to be. So I bit my tongue, my nails digging into my palm as I forced myself to stay quiet. The silence was unbearable. Some family members looked at me with wary eyes, as though suddenly seeing me through her warped lens. Others avoided looking at me altogether. In that moment, I realized the danger of her game. It wasn't about convincing them she was right, but about planting doubt. And doubt was enough to isolate me, to make me seem like the problem. She had weaponized invisibility itself. When I finally gathered the courage to speak, my voice trembled. "Sophia, you know exactly what you said about Daniel. You know what you've been doing for years. Don't turn this around." But she met my words with a soft, broken smile that made me look cruel by comparison. "Elena," she sighed, "I'm sorry you feel that way. Maybe you've misunderstood me." The crowd shifted again, whispers stirring. That phrase, "I'm sorry you feel that way," it was her favorite shield. She wasn't apologizing. She was dismissing, and the worst part was that most people didn't see the difference. They just saw a sister trying to keep peace, and another sister too angry to accept it. Later that night, when the guests had gone and silence filled my house, I sat alone at the table, replaying every word, every glance. My chest felt heavy, like a stone pressing down on my lungs. Was she winning again? Was she pulling them back into her orbit with her carefully staged act? Then, suddenly, I remembered the notebook. Every page I had filled, every detail I had recorded, every time she had mocked, manipulated, or shifted blame. I realized I wasn't powerless anymore. I had a record, a truth too solid to be dismissed with fake tears. But I also knew that proof wasn't enough. I would need courage, strategy, and timing. Sophia was clever, But I was no longer afraid of being clever in return. In the days that followed, her campaign against me grew bolder. She called relatives individually, playing the victim, twisting half-truths into full-blown betrayals. I found out through Clara that Sophia had even hinted I was mentally unstable, that my protectiveness over Daniel was borderline unhealthy. The cruelty of it left me breathless. She wasn't just mocking me anymore. She was trying to strip me of credibility, to isolate me completely. And still, some people began to waver, questioning her words quietly among themselves. It was a dangerous game of tug-of-war, and I was painfully aware that one wrong move could make me lose everyone. But in her desperation, Sophia made a mistake. At another gathering, perhaps overconfident, she let her mask slip. She joked about Daniel again, this time too sharply, too cruelly, her tone too biting to be dismissed as humor. And this time, Clara snapped. "Enough, Sophia!" she shouted, her voice carrying over the stunned silence. "We all heard what you said at his birthday. Stop pretending." Gasps followed, heads turned, and Sophia's carefully constructed innocence cracked, just for a moment. The room trembled with the weight of exposed truth. My heart pounded as I saw it, the first real break in her control, a fracture that could widen if only I dared to push. That night, as I tucked Daniel into bed, his little hands clutching mine tightly, I realized what was at stake. This wasn't just about me, or even Sophia. This was about what kind of family Daniel would grow up in, a family chained by lies, or one set free by truth. The fear was still there, gnawing at me, but now it was joined by something stronger: resolve. I would not let her win. For years I had been her victim. Now I would become her reckoning. And as I closed Daniel's bedroom door, I whispered to myself the words I had been too afraid to say aloud. The next time she tries to humiliate me, I'll be ready. And this time, everyone will see who she really is. I thought the tension from the birthday incident would settle, but instead it multiplied in ways I never imagined. The family group chat exploded with arguments, some defending me, others calling me dramatic and ungrateful. My sister Daniela had twisted the narrative, telling everyone I humiliated her without reason, painting herself as the victim. She ignored the fact that she mocked my son in front of everyone, ignoring his small, fragile heart. What shattered me most was realizing how easily people believed her version. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many of those who shared our blood could so quickly turn against me and my child. The days that followed were heavy, each family phone call dripping with judgment disguised as concern. My mother called and said, "Camilla, maybe you should have just ignored her. She was probably joking." Her words pierced me like a knife because they minimized my son's pain. How could they not see that his tears at the party weren't just from embarrassment, but from betrayal? He looked to the people who were supposed to love him most, and instead, he found laughter at his expense. I tried to explain to my mother that jokes can scar, that words carry weight, but she dismissed me with a sigh, as though I were exaggerating. But beneath my hurt, something stronger grew. Resolve. I realized that if the adults in the family couldn't protect my son's dignity, then I had to stand even taller for him. I started planning how to face this storm. I replayed Daniela's sneer at the party in my mind, her venomous tone as she told a child he didn't deserve a cake. There was a deeper reason behind her cruelty, something festering inside her that she wanted to project onto me and my boy. I knew her patterns, the jealousy, the bitterness, the hidden resentments. And I decided then that if she kept dragging my son into her games, I would expose the truth no matter how uncomfortable it made everyone. The chance came sooner than I expected. The next weekend, we gathered again at my parents' house for a Sunday lunch, a tradition that now felt more like walking into a battlefield. Daniela was already there, her smile stretched too wide, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she greeted everyone. When she hugged me, she whispered, "Ready for round 2? My skin crawled. She wanted a spectacle, another scene to twist against me. I clenched my fists under the table, reminding myself that this time, if she pushed me, I wouldn't just defend, I would reveal. As the meal went on, tension simmered just beneath the surface. Daniela made little digs at me, masked as playful remarks, while my parents laughed uneasily. I caught my son's eyes across the table, his small hand clutching his fork tightly as if he, too, felt the storm brewing. I promised him silently, with one look, that I wouldn't let her crush him again. And when she finally leaned back in her chair and smirked, saying, "Some people don't know how to raise strong kids, always so sensitive," I felt the entire room shift. This time, instead of swallowing my anger, I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor, and I said, clear enough for every ear to hear, "If you want to talk about weakness, Daniela, maybe it's time we tell everyone why you really lash out at children." The table fell silent, forks frozen mid-air. For the first time, Daniela's confident mask faltered. The moment my words hung in the air, the room became a vacuum. Every eye locked on Daniela. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. But beneath the fear, a quiet power surged through me. For years, she had twisted reality, used our family's loyalty to manipulate. And now, finally, the truth had a chance to shine. My voice didn't waver as I continued, recounting the party, her cruel comments to my son, the mocking laugh that had pierced his little heart. Faces turned pale, whispers began to ripple, and for the first time, I saw hesitation in her eyes. She tried to mask it with a fake laugh, but it trembled, like a castle built on sand beginning to collapse. Daniel sat beside me, clutching my hand as he listened wide-eyed. I felt his tiny fingers squeeze mine in understanding and trust. That connection, the bond that had been tested over weeks of whispers and manipulations, gave me courage. I spoke of every subtle cruelty, every whisper of doubt she had spread, and every moment she had tried to turn people against me and my son. My parents' expressions shifted from shock to confusion, and a few relatives gasped audibly. The web she had so carefully spun began to unravel right in front of everyone, and I could almost hear the faint cracking of her composure. Daniela's smirk vanished, replaced with a flicker of panic. She tried to counter, of course. "Camilla, you're exaggerating," she said, her voice high and sharp, attempting to regain control. But this time, no one laughed. No one nodded in agreement. The allies I had quietly gathered over weeks, Clara, my grandmother, even a few cousins, spoke up one after another. They confirmed what I had said, adding their own experiences of her manipulation. "We've seen it too," Clara said firmly, her tone carrying a weight that stopped Daniela cold. Each testimony was like a hammer striking her carefully constructed armor. The room was no longer on her side. The tide had turned, and I could feel it. My mother's face reflected the shock that rippled across the family. She had always avoided conflict, siding silently with Daniela when convenient, but the truth was undeniable. My recounting of the incidents, backed by witnesses, had forced everyone to confront the reality they had long ignored. Daniela's eyes darted around the room, seeking sympathy that no longer existed. For the first time, I saw her isolated, the queen of whispers stripped of her throne. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to taste. My son, now beaming with relief, leaned against me, whispering, "Mom, you're my hero." That innocent declaration made every accusation, every moment of fear, worth it. Finally, Daniela's mask shattered completely. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sincerity, but of panic and rage, and she stumbled out of the room, muttering excuses that no one believed. The silence she left behind was heavy, but filled with clarity. Conversations began to shift. Apologies muttered quietly as family members processed the revelation. My mother, once hesitant, finally approached me, her voice trembling. "Camila, I didn't see it before." I nodded, holding Daniel tightly, feeling the first real sense of justice and relief. The storm that had haunted us was finally subsiding, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of truth and vindication filling the room. The days after Daniela's meltdown were surreal. The house felt lighter, as though a weight that had pressed on us for years had finally lifted. Conversations were cautious but honest. Family members who had been unsure of where to stand approached me privately, offering apologies and quiet support. My son, Daniel, bounced around with uncontained joy, blissfully unaware of the emotional battle that had raged around him. For the first time, I felt the security of knowing he would grow up in a home where his worth was never in question, where love wasn't conditional on games or manipulation. Every time I looked at him, his innocent smile reminded me that standing up for the truth had been worth every moment of fear. Even Daniela, now isolated, seemed smaller somehow, a shadow of the person who had once wielded her charm like a weapon. I didn't gloat. I only observed quietly as she navigated the aftermath of her actions. There were no apologies, no explanations that could undo the hurt she had caused, but her power over the family had been shattered. Witnessing her stripped of the control she had wielded for years gave me a profound sense of closure, not just for myself, but for Daniel, and for every family member who had been silently complicit in the past. The room that had once trembled under her influence now hummed with a renewed sense of honesty and care. My mother, who had wavered for so long, finally approached me one evening, a look of deep remorse in her eyes. "Camila," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I didn't realize what was happening. I should have protected you and Daniel sooner." I held her hands, feeling the tremor of regret in her grip, and whispered back, "It's okay, Mom. The important thing is that we're here now, together, and we can move forward." It was a fragile truce, built on recognition of past mistakes, but it was a beginning. Healing, I realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, accountability, and the courage to confront what had been buried for too long. The family slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. Gatherings were no longer tinged with unspoken tension or fear. Laughter returned, tentative at first, but growing more genuine with each shared story and each smile exchanged. Daniel's presence became a constant reminder of why I had fought so fiercely, for innocence, for love, and for the sanctity of truth. I watched him play with cousins who had previously been influenced by Sophia's whispers, and I realized that the cycle of manipulation had finally been broken. Our home felt safe again, and I could breathe without the heavy weight of constant vigilance pressing down on my chest. Looking back on the past weeks, I understood something profound. Standing up for yourself, for your child, and for the truth is never easy. It requires courage, patience, and the willingness to endure discomfort until justice prevails. The victories are quiet at first, almost imperceptible, but they grow steadily until the moment arrives when the truth can no longer be denied. And in that moment, clarity washes over everything, leaving only the reality of what really matters: love, integrity, and the unshakable bond between parent and child. If you followed Camila's journey and felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph along with us, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional, dramatic stories like this one. Don't forget to like the video if you were moved by this story, and stay tuned for more moments where truth and courage shine against the odds. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows us to continue sharing journeys that touch the heart and soul.